Welcome back to another episode of the AI Journal podcast. Today, we're joined by Peter Ruffley and Matthew Napleton from Zizo Software. We're really excited to bring this episode. We've got a lot to talk about. Me and Kieran met them earlier in the month and had a great conversation. I'm really excited to bring them to you today. So to kick us off, Peter and Matthew, could each of you please give us a quick overview of who you are, your role within Zizo, and what got you to this role today, please?
Okay, hi, I'm Pete Ruffley. I'm the CEO of Zizo. Oh, what got me here? God, that's a great question. Who knows? I guess too lazy to work and too nervous to steal, obviously, is the easy answer. But really, the truth is that I've been in IT for a very long time, and I've followed it through as an eager practitioner and a believer in the benefits that IT can bring to business properly handled. And that's really been our mission since the very start of the company 20 years ago. So that's what got me here, and that's why I'm here. That's what we're doing today.
Love it. And Matthew, what about you, sir?
Yeah, hello everybody. Matthew Napleton. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Zizo Software. So I've been working with data now for 15 years. I've been with Zizo for over 13 years. It's watched us grow as a business. What got me here today, I think, is just a love of data and technology. You know, I was a coder as a kid. I used to love working with technologies and computers, even though I did a drama degree at university. But, you know, we love working with data. We're so excited by the opportunities that data kind of gives everyone right now, and the fact that it's become ubiquitous and it's really changing the game for so many different industries. And I think that's why it's really exciting for us to be here today, and why I think it's absolutely fantastic to work with data and information.
Yeah, love it. And where do you think then? Where was the origin story of Zizo Software? Where did it all come about? What was that moment where it was like, bingo, we've got a great idea here and something was going to happen?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question, because as ever with companies like ours, it's always a journey, isn't it? And where you think you're going and where you start off isn't necessarily where you go. So where we originally started off was quite simply that we wanted to prove to companies that they could do things probably that they didn't think were possible. So where the company started off right at the very beginning, the first thing that we did as a company was to actually move a mainframe system for a very large insurance company off a mainframe onto a local area network. And to tell you the truth, we did that because they didn't believe we could do it. And it all came after we said, no, you can't do that. And we actually went ahead and we did that. And it was from that we kind of gained our credentials of well, you'd never guess what they did kind of thing, you know, and that was how we started. So they were our first customer. And then we kind of went on from that doing similar it can't be done kind of project with Vodafone and people like that. Yeah. But we came across the very first incarnations of in-memory technology that was being spun out of the Ministry of Defence by Kinetic. And it seemed to us at that point that what you could do with in-memory technology was so astounding that it was something that we just had to do. So that was really, that was the light bulb moment, was when we did a project with Travis Perkins, and that was another, you can't do that. It's impossible for you to, and what they actually wanted to do, this is a true story, stop me if I'm boring you, this is a true story. They actually wanted us to recreate invoices because the biggest problem they had was builders coming back into their depots and saying, oh, this isn't the right stuff, I want you to credit me and all the rest of it. And them saying to the builder, where's the invoice? And him going, well, I don't know, you know, I'm a builder, I don't know, you know. And we actually showed them that from individual lines of transactions, and you can imagine how many of those there were, that we could actually recreate online in real time the invoice as they'd had it, as they'd actually been. And that was the kind of moment we thought, well, if you could do this with it, what can't you do? And in our kind of, you know, technical IT, where it's just like, well, this is just brilliant, because it does really, really exciting things. And again, it's got that great thing, you know, I've just said to you about, you can't do that. Oh, yes, we can.
Yeah, that will probably be a recurring theme throughout this podcast, is people telling us to do something and us actually doing it. You know, and
in that case, Matthew, you can't give me and Tom $1 million each.
Give me some time. No, but it's one of those. But yeah, it's one of those things where actually, you know, as data engineers, as we would call ourselves, not just technologists, it's, how can we really understand what people want to do with data and then challenge ourselves and them to say, right, now we've done this, what else can be done with it? And that's a really exciting place to be at the minute. Is people are starting to challenge the status quo, saying, well, actually, if I can utilize this data and this data together, what else can I do with it? How can I combine these data sets together to get a more holistic view of that? And whether that's AI, machine learning, or cloud technologies or edge technologies, whatever it may be, people are starting to go, actually, I've got a much better handle on my data now. I understand it better. I understand the business context, and by doing that, you can go, actually, what else can we do, and how can we improve on those business processes, which I think is really, really the key of the matter here right now. It's really cool.
Yeah, love it. So explain to us quickly then, you gave some great overview of like how things are happening and how you didn't believe you, and then you ended to turn it up into a fine result and an amazing result. So what's led to this today, which is awesome to see. And it's really awesome to see, Matthew and Peter. But give us a picture then. How can companies utilize data at a price that matches the value of that data? Because remember, we were speaking about it last time, and it was one of the USPs of Zizo software. Draw us a picture for that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's going on today, of course, and we think about the IoT revolution and this ability to store and manage absolutely vast quantities of what's low-value data from sensors that are pinging back every second or so. How do we understand what the inherent value is in that data? And because one of the challenges that big data faced, and I think we all remember with that Farrago, whatever happened, the idea was just to chuck everything into a very, very cheap sounding on the cloud kind of, data lake stroke data swamp as it's now become, and actually keep all of that together and then try and mine the data later. Well, actually, there is a huge cost associated with doing that. There's a huge opportunity cost when you could be doing something else, where you find out there's little or no value in it. And there's also a huge time cost and also a monetary cost in saying how much we keep in that. So what we're trying to do is say, actually, how can we prototype quickly? How can we see real value in the data quickly? And how can we give you technological environments that enable you to see that value really, really fast? There's no point collecting reams and reams of data if there's no value in it. There's no point in Wi-Fiing up a giant factory for X million with 5G if there's no value in saving and managing that data. So how can we provide a cost-effective platform utilizing in-memory technology but on small hardware footprints that enables people to go, there is value here. How do I scale that? How do I improve that? And how do I change my business processes to make the best use of that data? And that's something that is really, really key to us, is saying, if we combine this data and we then give that data some context, how can you then change the business outcomes utilizing that data in a cost-effective manner? And I suppose that really gets down to the crux of it.
Is there a bit of a chicken and egg here? Because I find quite often that organizations don't know the data they've got, don't understand what they can do with the data in terms of extracting real directional business insight or profitable business outcomes. How do you go around that square circle? How do you get them to understand and give you access and a faith to let you in with your technology to extract value, to build a business case, to get them to want more?
Oh, yeah, this is a very good point, right? Because people's tendency at the moment, and Matt's alluded to the big data, Farrago. People's tendency is always to give me all the data. Let me keep it all. Then I know I'm not throwing anything away, and all that gold dust will be in there somewhere. Now, the problem is that by the time you've collected all your mountains of data together, it's all your money's gone on keeping the data. That's where the problem is. The unfortunate thing is, and the thing that we always say, the work of finding value in that data has got to be done somewhere. At some point, you've got to do it. Whether it's when you actually collect the data or when you've got the data on the cloud, at some point, somebody is going to have to find out where that value is. Now, the difference in our approach that our technology allows is this. What we can do very quickly, and I mean this really quickly, is to assemble very, very large amounts of data in a single instance on small hardware footprint, and actually find out there and then whether there is any value in the data. So, for example, for Marks and Spencer's, we put together 2 years' worth of transactions in a matter of 3 days onto a single database to see whether there was any coherence in their sales patterns. And that's what we did. We could tell them, they gave us 10 tasks to do, and we did that within a week. Now, The problem where people have very, very large amounts of data, that to get to that point, they have to spend huge amounts of money, not just on teams of people, but on equipping some kind of cloud setup. Now, I know we've talked about this before, and I know everybody thinks that the cloud is cheap. Well, it isn't. Not when you have these vast amounts of data on it. What we concentrate on doing is having a compressed, small amount of data and actually answering some business questions there and then. And this kind of leapfrogs the stage that companies get them at, which is, well, I can't possibly say what the value is in my data until I've got all the data assembled. Not true. Absolutely not true.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that what Pete's alluding to is, getting the right data to the right person at the right time is absolutely vital. How do we make sure that the right person gets the right data to make those business decisions? And that's really, really important. But equally, it's something we've alluded to is our own journey through data. But actually, I think, looking at some of our other customers, like a well-known global tobacco company, for example, they've been on a journey with us through their data because we didn't start with any prescribed kind of data to go after. We've just started to pull different data sets together. And what started out as an IoT, challenge, can we build a connected vaping device, has actually turned into a rather larger scale user behavior device. So it's got data from multiple wearables. It's got algorithms in the background which are looking at customer behavior. It's got, looking at physiological stuff alongside it. So we've gone on the journey from not just looking at a single device. We've gone to the end of saying, how can we use data to look at the entire scientific process? And that's a journey that, you have to lead some customers down because they don't, instantly see that themselves. And that's kind of our job in a way, is to say, look, you've got this data. Could we do this with it? And if you're always bringing new ideas to people and saying, actually, we've known this, and because we've done this in other areas, you could actually do this. Because I suppose, what you'll find is actually a lot of the challenges that we've had in different sectors, and Pete's mentioned some of the people we've worked with, are actually totally relevant from a data perspective to many other sectors, just with a slightly different spin. Because it's just the data, at the end of the day. But okay, at M&S, it was a processing speed and volume challenge with 8 billion rows of data and all that kind of, malarkey. But equally, it was how do you mesh that data together and see there's patterns fall out of the data. And actually, that's very similar to the challenge that BAT have from a physiological perspective with multiple devices and different timeframes. How do you mesh that data together to see if there's those patterns that fall out? And it's looking at it from a data engineering perspective, not necessarily from what's the perfect business outcome, but we can get somewhere down the line and show people something new and innovative and say, actually, have we thought about trying this? And then prototype that, see if it works.
Yeah, because that's interesting, because lots of business areas think of them like unique. I'm in pharma, I'm in tobacco, I'm in retail. Yeah. And therefore, when they go out and look for a data scientist, team, company, whatever else, they want someone with that experience. But what you're describing there, Matthew, sounds like the patterns of data are cross-applicable in various industries. And therefore, if you know what to look for and how to mine it and do whatever, then the fact that it's different data in a different industry means you can mine value. Did I hear that right? Yeah,
because let me give you an example of something we've literally just done. So going back to another one of our customers, which is Parcelforce, right? So we've worked with Parcelforce for a long time, but I suppose the pinnacle of what we've done for Parcelforce, and Pete, interject if I get this wrong, is to integrate, pretty much all of their data sources, but break that down to an individual cost level, so they can see precisely how much it costs to get a parcel from point A to point B through the network. So that's every single depot, every single truck, every single person, the IT costs, the HR costs, etc., to calculate the profitability of a parcel, basically, or a route, or a depot, or a person. And that flipped their business model around. Now, recently, we were asked to look at a major infrastructure organisation to understand the cost of moving a piece of freight from point A to point B. Well, that's logistics, but it's large scale highways, etc., or railways. But actually, that's the same challenge. It's just a different thing you're moving from point A to point B, and that could be a passenger. It's the same model. It's just an element that you're moving from point A to point B, and that's a data integration challenge and a business rules challenge of saying, now we have this data. How can we then map these business rules to say, rather than a parcel, this is a freight object, it's a truck or a person? It's the same rules, slightly different data sets. But what the Zizo technology, what we did to do is build a ubiquitous model around that, and then apply, just inject the data one end and then massage it to come out the other end in a way that makes sense to the customer.
Yeah. I mean, not to get too what's the right word, philosophical about this. There's more to this than meets the eye. You know, there's kind of, we come across this all the time, and I know, Kieran, we talked about this last time, that there's this perception, this belief, this almost, which is almost charming in its naivety, that somehow if we just put enough data in one place and apply enough computing power to it, the computer will tell us something that we just didn't know. You know, there'll be some blinding insight that everybody in the company has missed, that we would just, and it will make us a fortune. And that belief is still prevalent. But what we found is this, and this is kind of really quite interesting. Sometimes there is no value. Sometimes there is no value in your data. But one thing that we did find is this: by applying the type of technology that we have, which is, we're saying, very, very low cost, small hardware footprint, which allows you to do a sort of processing at a price which you just couldn't do. You couldn't afford to do it any other way. But it'll find your value in becoming an information-based company in this way. Let me just give you this very quick example, right? Marks and Spencer's, right? We put a system in there which showed them where you could see everything from how much you were selling in, you know, the entire division through a store, down to an individual department, down to, you know, individual sizes of socks, black socks, right? Now, what we couldn't do, unfortunately for Steve Rowe, and I know Steve, and I know he wouldn't mind me saying this, we couldn't make it 1995 again, right? We couldn't make them the kind of successful retailer that they were then. But what we could do, and what I mean by that is the sales figures weren't going up. And everybody knows that about Marks and Spencer's. But what we did do was give them a system which was so powerful, where on a Friday afternoon in the store on Oxford Street, they could look at the figures and go, right, we've got an hour left of opening time. We're 0.1 behind our sales target, right? We can see that because we've got a 2-minute refresh on our system, right? In menswear, everybody into menswear, all the suits back on the rack, all the staff into menswear. Nobody who comes in here leaves without a suit, right? And by doing that, right, they could make up the difference in and hit their sales target for the day because they knew that they were that close. Now, that's not some great insight. That's not going to make them the leaders of women's fashion again, but it enabled their staff to hit the target. So it's not just sometimes that there's some blinding insight there. Sometimes there's a really, really practical application for being able to see your data up to date all the time and giving it to all the people. So, you know, it doesn't sound quite as romantic as the other way, but it can still make you money.
Yeah, I think just on that point, you know, it's amazing that a lot of organisations that we still speak to who have got a lot of data, but they haven't got a lot of insight. You know, they just they're collecting a lot of stuff, but it's just either become too big or it's too entrenched in silos, or to actually do anything with it. And then, you know, that is about starting small. It's about saying, right, let's pull some stuff together and let's see what we can do. Because if you try and boil the ocean, to put another horrible term in there, you know, you're never going to find anything in any relevant time frame to do anything about it. You know, and that's the opportunity cost piece, right? You can sit there and try and integrate your data for 2 years, but by the time you found an insight about what happened 2 years ago, there's no point doing it. Frankly.
I love it. We were literally having a conversation earlier and we were looking at digital asset management. And he said, try and find a picture from a week ago. You'll probably do it. Try and find a picture from a day ago. Sorry, you'll do it. Try and find a picture from a week ago. Possible. 2 weeks ago, harder. A month ago, a year ago, he just said it will get harder and harder. And that is like a different way of looking at it. And it brings such a good point what you made, Peter and Matthew, because looking at how people actually use data, and I think we spoke about it last time, is that going to do what you want it to do for that business? But if they do have all this data and you do need to look at it as Zizo software, what is the importance of compression? What role does that play? And what's the kind of view on the holistic view, the security? Can you give the audience a bit of a background on how that can play an important role, please?
Yeah, okay. I mean, quite simply, it's a question of applying the maximum computing power and getting as much bang for your computing buck as you possibly can. Our particular technology is mathematically the most effective and efficient way of holding data. There's no more efficient way of holding it than we hold it. That's just a matter of mathematics. But what it means is that you can actually get colossal amounts of data into a very small space. And once it's in memory, and this is the $64,000 benefit, the processing power and the speed of response becomes virtually instantaneous. So what it means is that you can ask lots of questions very quickly and get the answer straight away. Whenever you're doing data analytics, what you tend to do is to ask a question and go, well, that's not what I wanted to know. That's not what I expected to see. No, that doesn't seem to be right. What I really need to know is, and it's being able to go through that cycle very, very quickly, because the most expensive part is the person who's sitting there asking the questions. And if the delay between them asking a question and getting an answer is equal to a coffee break, then obviously you're not getting much computing bang for your bucks from the person that's actually asking the questions. So where our technology is different and very enabling, you can give people the sort of computing power that they only really dream about when you'd all have to have massive mainframe systems. Well, we can basically give you that on at the moment, we're giving it literally on a PM50, which is about, 4 inches cubed. It costs £500. So it's money. It's all to do with the money,
Yeah, and on top of that, I think the database itself is we've got 7 patents on the database. It's the world's only patent database, and that stores data as the kind of rawest information, as Pete's alluded to. But that is in itself a kind of encryption. But we also use Intel's AVX512. We work very closely with Intel on understanding the kind of encryption methodologies and software engineering for the platform itself. So the thing is about the Zizo technology is it's actually been around for a while. We've used it in a number of different ways, and it's had to be enterprise class, right? We haven't been able to do these things just by using a couple of bits of duct tape around a laptop. It's been deployed for thousands of users on hundreds of billions of rows of data. So it's an enterprise class piece of technology, and the privacy, we've got the different versioning in there, so you can have multiple users looking at the same data sets. With complete version control and historical analysis, as well as all the stuff you'd expect from data encrypted in flight as well as at rest. So those security questions that we've had to go through over the years, we're then passing on to stuff that we've had to do. We then utilize in our own bit of kit.
And I'd love to know then. So some great points and some great suggestions of what to do, and some great case studies and examples. Really love that, and I'm sure the audience will love it. What would you say, each of you, maybe Peter first and Matthew? What would your piece of advice be, or what would your question be to companies not knowing what to do with their data or how to approach these kind of models that you've talked about and we've discussed? What would be that piece of advice or that question you'd ask to the audience, whether they're a business owner or an individual?
What I would say is this: there's always a way to make a business case. Yeah. There's always a way to make a business case on paper with a pen or whatever. You have to use a pen or a pencil. There's always a way to do that before you start buying hardware or software or anything else, right? There is always a way to ask some questions. The worst thing you can do, if I can kind of answer it the other way, the worst thing you can do is to say, right, the first thing to do is get all this data on a computer. That's what we need to do. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. If you do that, and I just noticed this week, incidentally, that MI6 and GCHQ have just signed up with AWS literally this week. They're giving them between 500 million and £1 billion over the next decade. I can guess which one it's going to be. And they're going to hold all their data on AWS. I mean, and the guy actually says, that the guy in charge of GCHQ says, it's not just because we're going to hold some data. Oh, yes, it is. That's exactly what it is. Now, he would say, I can't possibly tell you what, because I don't know what I need to know. I don't know what I need to know. Yeah. Well, okay, but you must know something right now about what do you need to know now. So why don't we start there? We don't know what you need to know in the future or anything else. And this is the same whether you're the head of GCHQ or you're a plumber's merchant in Bradford. You might not know everything you need to know right now, but you know what you need to know right at this minute. Write it down. Yeah. Make a business case. This business would be better if I knew these things, right? Then have I got the data which supports me knowing those things? That's the first thing you must always do. Lots and lots of times we go into situations where people say, "Oh, no, can you tell me this?" And we say, "Well, we could tell you, but you don't collect that data. You don't have the data. You've got everybody's name and address, but you've not got the post or whatever, you know." And typically people go, "What? Do you mean we're not collecting that?" And it's like, well, you could have found that out before I expensively sat in front of you. You know, that is the key to all this. I know it doesn't sound very glamorous or very exciting, but that's the first thing you must always do. Do it on a piece of paper. If you can't do it on a piece of paper, you ain't going to be able to do it on a computer.
So true.
I think, you know, for mine, Pete's sort of going to answer this in a way, but for me, it's asking why. Why are we doing this? And quite so many times, you know, there are situations where you just jump headlong in with both feet into doing something before you actually answer the why. And from a global context, not that, you know, can I shift my operational points 1 or 2% up? It's why are we doing this? Is it, you know, what is the outcome here? What's going to have a global impact on what we do? And then start to work backwards from that. Because, you know, if you're going to do that, you have to start collecting data, right? If you're going to start doing that, and, you know, then you have to combine that data. But then even if you've done that, as Pete says, unless you can provide context to that piece of information to say why it's important to you, then you can't do anything with it, right? You've just got shed loads of data that you're not doing anything with. So until you can provide that context to the business, particularly to people who would go, well, actually, that could save me 10,000 hours in manufacturing this week, or that could save me, you know, £3,000 in wasted stock every day. You know, you haven't created that context. But then that context then moves into understanding what you can change, right? So there may be things that you can change to collect that data differently or better. Or things you aren't collecting that you need to then go back through that cycle of saying, right, I've done all these things now, and because it's a constantly improving cycle, you're never going to have the full answer, right? But you still have to keep an eye on the why you're doing it, because you can jump into rabbit holes with data. And we've been down many a rabbit hole with customers who said, we'd like to do this. And it's like, great, well, let's do it. And then you get to in and go, well, that's great. And you go, well, why were we doing it? It's like, well, we thought it'd be good. And it's like, we thought it'd have a great impact, and it doesn't. It's like, well, we didn't. Okay. So that's what I'd say, you know, is make sure that you've got a real grip on, keep a grip of the why, and make sure the business understands the why you're doing it. Because projects, you know, do fail with people lose interest. You know, if it takes too long, people lose interest. So you have to still have that why drive to say, why are we doing this, pushing it through. So that's the most important thing for me.
Yeah. And you know, just on that point, if you ever see, you know, if you were just doing like a proof of concept, and anything like that, it doesn't have to, you know, if you were doing a proof of concept, it doesn't have to be a computing proof of concept, does it? The most important thing is, what are the success criteria of that going to be? Honestly, if you haven't got those, then whatever you do, it's never going to work. You're never going to know whether it's succeeded or not. And just going back to, you know, what we said at the start, sometimes this is a very, very difficult thing for business people to grasp, because they want IT, you know, they want the idea of IT, and the IT that they want, honestly, unless you're on the Star Trek Enterprise, it doesn't exist. You know, you've got to start off by figuring out what you want to do, and then we can help you figure out whether you've got the data to support those ambitions. And that's where our technology goes. We'll do it really quick. We can put data together quickly. We can ask it questions. But until we know, like Matt says, why are we doing it? What are we trying to get out of it? Then I'm afraid it's going to be doomed to failure. And of course, plenty of IT companies have made plenty of money out of that. You know, I'm not against Jeff Bezos, but look, he's building his own personal real life version of Star Trek, isn't he? That's how much money he's making. So and he's the main man. Like, just put it all on here, it'll all be fine.
Don't worry about it. Just it's all good.
It'll all be fine.
What's the worst that can happen?
Let the magic.
The magic will happen. But I was laughing because I was thinking when you were saying that, Peter and Matthew, you know, at times we were consulting with someone and they were saying, well, we want to do this, we want to do that. And you think, well, okay, what's your 18-month strategy? Well, we don't know. It's like, well, what do you want to do with it in 18 months? Or what do you want to do in 12 months? It was blank. And it was like, perfect point, because you think you don't need to buy hardware. And we're literally on the same page about it, because you think, well, when people ask me from a media perspective, and they ask Kieran and other people from our team, what's the future of AI? What's going to be in 10 years? I'm like, what am I having for dinner in 3 weeks? I don't know that kind of far ahead, and I don't have a strategy for that. So if you don't go to it, I think you made an excellent point to the audience, because just getting that strategy really will leapfrog the business to what do you actually want to do with it? How do you want to use it? Why do you want to use it in that way? To your point, Matthew, why? And I think that's a brilliant point. A brilliant point. And I'd just like to know, just finishing off, where can people find you? Because I feel like we could talk for ages and keep going, and I'm sure people will love an episode too. But where can people find out about Peter and Matthew, and where can people find out about Zizo Software? What's the next steps?
Yeah, so we're actually presenting at the Cambridge Wireless International Conference at Duxford, under the aircraft, which is going to be pretty cool. That's on the 9th of November. So that'll be great. And then following enough, the next 2 days, 10th, 11th, with the Manufacturing Made Smarter conference, where we'll actually be launching our edge analysis device to the masses. So if you want to come along and see, big data in a tiny device, please come along and see us. You look on the websites for those guys, Manufacturing Made Smarter, and of course, all the case studies we've mentioned today, most of them are available on our website, zizo.co.uk. Just go and take a look. There's some blogs up there, etc. Feel free to jump on our LinkedIn page as well. There's plenty of stuff on there. So that's where we are. Please come and give a chat with us. We're always welcome to talk.
Yeah, and I hope you can see for the type of people that we are. We're extremely pragmatic people, right? We know, that mentioning no names, that in the IT business, there are a lot of organisations that you get involved with where you're not necessarily going to get value for money. But what you will get from us is a straight answer. I can absolutely guarantee that. If you can't do it, we'll be the first to tell you.
I think after this interview, myself and Tom could guarantee that for folks as well.
That's basically why we're still here, because we tend to tell the truth about where you are and what we can do and what we can't do. So we're always open for a chat, basically.
Awesome. And really appreciate your time today. We'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can find you, the audience can find you. And Matthew, Peter, really appreciate it. Had some fun today. Got some great examples. A lot of ways people can be thinking about what they're going to be doing next. So really appreciate both your time, and thank you for joining us on this podcast.
Great. Good
Thanks,
to talk to you.
Thanks, Kieran. Pleasure as
Thanks,
always.
Cheers.
Cheers.